Hi everybody, I want to thank you for coming. Oh, come on in, come on in.
Please come on in.
You guys will be late.
Not late at all. Let's start over.
Hi Angela, good to see you.
Very good.
My name is Dave King, and it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Orcutt and his novel 100 Miles from Manhattan. Chris and I met at the beginning of this century. We were both teaching freshman English at Merritt College, and we kind of just found ourselves in the same place. I think we were at a faculty meeting, and we were both bored, and we began, yeah, really. And we began chatting, and we realized we had a tremendous amount in common. And I was thrilled to meet Chris because he had a book that had been published, which was called I Hope You Boys Know What You're Doing, which I immediately got and I loved. And so, in a way, I looked up to him, and we became literary friends. And Chris was very generous to me when my book came out, working on my website and all of that. And you know, writing is such a lonely existence that the friends that you make, that you can talk to about the difficulty and the struggle and the successes, become really, really important. And so Chris has been that for me for more than a decade. He's the author of the two Dakota Stevens mysteries. I want to make sure I get the titles exactly right. A Real Piece of Work, which I happen to really adore. I think it's a wonderful thriller. And The Rich Are Different, and a short story collection called The Man, the Myth, the Legend. And he's a friend and beloved part of the lives of many of us here. So without further ado, Chris Orcutt.
Thank you, Dave. Alexis, that air conditioner. I want to thank Dave for that wonderful introduction. Alexis for the fine spread that she put on back there. As usual, she's party planner par excellence. Scott, the owner of Merritt Books, and Susan, the new manager, who are giving me the opportunity to do this here, and all of the Merritt staff. I really appreciate all of you coming. Some of you came from great distances, some of you walked down the street, but I really appreciate it. I guess like anyone doing one of these things, I was concerned, what if nobody shows up? And then I would have the typical neurotic writer's worry, well, what if 50 people show up? So you can't win. I'm going to read to you a section from 100 Miles from Manhattan. I'm going to read to you a portion of the chapter titled Wellington Trials. And in this chapter, this is written from the point of view of a New York City book editor who is coming to and through Wellington for the first time. He's coming to visit his new lover. Although I've had several authors from Wellington over the years, including a former editor pal turned best-selling mystery novelist, not one of them had deigned to invite me to so much as a cocktail party up here. Creeping through the village that Saturday morning in a rental car, I passed a shiny aluminum diner and myriad antiques dealers, and continued on through a hamlet mysteriously called Rabbitsville, although I didn't see a single rabbit to warrant the name. From there, I followed sandwich boards pointing to Fox Hill. The road ribboned out in front of me, over rolling green hills and miles of black wooden fence. The sky was a soft summer blue. In the hollows, pockets of thin fog hovered over the grass. The whole countryside had a vaguely mystical aura, like Mr. Darcy's Derbyshire. Most of the drive from Manhattan, however, had been tedious. Droning along the empty and wooded Taconic Parkway, still half asleep, I had started to question the wisdom of traveling 2 hours upstate for a young woman with whom I had done nothing but have inordinate sex, and that only in her favored cowgirl position. To be fair, we had managed to squeeze in a few substantial conversations about books. For a young woman of prodigious sexual appetite, she was surprisingly well read, Chekhov stories being her favorites. About technology, she embraced the useful, citing her automatic lights and a robotic vacuum cleaner that perpetually crawled around the apartment. And about lifestyles, she adored simplicity, bordering on the Spartan. Every room in her apartment contained minimal furniture and absolutely no knickknacks. But since those conversations invariably took place before or after sex, I considered them suspect and not representative of how we would relate under less sybaritic circumstances. For that reason, the weekend was a test, or as she had put it, a trial run for us. Of course, there was a chance she'd tire of me by Sunday evening, but I doubted it. When we'd kissed goodbye Wednesday night at the clock in Grand Central, practically making out in the withering gaze of the information booth clerk, she had clung to me like someone to a tree in a hurricane, gushing about the upcoming competition, the recent good weather, the soggy spring and how it would affect the course, the wide assortment of obstacles she had to jump, her rival riders, her private cottage on the estate, and how much her parents were going to love me. We kissed one last time at the train doors. She put her hand on my heart. Just so you know, you're the only guy I've ever taken up there. The only one. Ever. The road began a long, steady climb, and in the field to my right, some riders trotted along the fence. When I reached the summit, a who's who of luxury cars and SUVs, intermingled with an ambulance and a Wellington police car, lined both shoulders of the road. I parked and followed the other spectators, or guests of the riders, I presumed, down a path between two fences toward the warm-up area. For early June, it was hot, not even 9 o'clock yet, and easily 80 degrees. In a summer suit and pastel striped tie, I was farcically overdressed compared to the people around me, but that was the brochure's fault. In the photos, everyone looked as if they were at the Kentucky Derby, so I had dressed accordingly. Out in the field, a rider approached a water jump, the horse cantering toward it at an angle. I consulted the map and the brochure Titania had given me. It showed this course, the cross-country course, as a giant loop, ending on the near side of a large copse of trees and beginning on the far side. An observation tower rose above the trees. There were people at the top, barely visible. The path I was on between the fences passed the cool-down area. A pair of riders, male and female, approached each other at the fence line. "Michael, how was she?" I pulled up at 17. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it didn't feel right. I mean, she's fine, but it's still pretty mushy out there." "It is." "You'd think that with all their money, they'd do something about the drainage. Anyway, how'd you do?" "Pretty good, I think. No penalties anyway. At least Caprice isn't competing this year. Gone gun crazy, apparently. Spending all her time at the shooting club. What about Titania? Has she ridden yet?" "No, she's in the next grouping. Hopefully my time will hold up." Hearing another competitor mention Titania gave me a sadistic feeling of pride. The others were clearly afraid of her. The warm-up area sat in the shade of the trees. 4 riders and their mounts trotted around a small field as Phalian spectators stood beside the fence. Even though she was wearing a helmet, I picked out Titania immediately. She sat taller and steadier in her saddle than the others, clucking her horse, a glistening deep chestnut, into a canter. She rode in lazy circles, her face fiercely concentrated, until she noticed me and beamed. Wheeling the horse around, she jumped off before coming to a complete stop and ran toward the fence. I didn't know whether spectators were allowed in the warm-up area, but when I saw the elation on Titania's face, I didn't care. I climbed over the fence and she threw her arms around me and kissed me like we were alone in her Park Avenue bedroom. When she looked up at me, her eyes were soft and gleaming. "You're here." "I am." She tapped me on the behind with her riding crop. "And fabulously overdressed. Do you ever not wear a suit?" I pinched the sleeve of her polo shirt. "Yeah? What's this? I thought you'd be wearing one of those fancy jackets with an ascot." "You mean a cravat? Silly, those are for dressage, which was yesterday, and which I kicked ass in, by the way." "Jolly good show." "Dork." With a quick glance over her shoulder, she sprang up on her tiptoes and spoke hotly in my ear. "I want to show you the stables after. There's a certain pile of hay with our names on it." She kissed me again. "Gotta go. Wish me luck." A man boosted her into the saddle. "Good luck. Where do I go now?" "The tower. My parents and the other sponsors are up there, along with some of the delegates. Best view of the course. See you in half an hour, baby." Before I could get her parents' names, she trotted away to the far end of the field, stopping the horse several yards away from the other riders. I found the tower and climbed the stairs, 4 flights of them, pausing on the final landing to dab my face with my pocket square. Then I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and continued to the top. 3 couples stood at the rails, along with a man and 2 women in matching crested jackets and straw plantation hats. The equestrian team delegates, I reasoned. A woman in an event uniform handed me a pair of binoculars and a glass of champagne. "Who is your party, sir?" "I'm with Titania Hammersley." A tall, balding man with tufts of white hair on either side of his head swung around from the railing and eyed me superciliously. He tapped the arm of a woman beside him. "The boyfriend." The woman was a dark brunette with alabaster skin. At first I saw her only in profile. And was enchanted by her fine features. But when she turned to face me, and face me she did with her cool Slavic eyes, I felt as though I were seeing a living incarnation of Anna Karenina. "Ah, yes, the book editor. It's a pleasure to meet you both, Peter Ford." "John." "Natasha." I shook hands with them. "May I join you?" "Certainly." John stepped aside, creating space between him and his wife. "Titania's first in her group. Should be starting any minute. I've been looking forward to seeing her ride." Natasha turned to me. "These books you edit, what is the genre?" Her accent was noticeable. Titania had told me that her mother was one of the original Russian mail-order brides, but until I heard Natasha speak, the fact hadn't fully registered with me. "Fiction," I said. "Literary." "This includes romance, yes?" "Yes, Natasha, some." John's eyes flashed. "What? No nonfiction?" He threw his arms up, apparently forgetting he was holding a glass of champagne. Half of it went over the railing. "Well, yes," I said, "a bit. How about ghostwriters? Know any? I was thinking of doing a book myself." "Oh, what about?" "You know, this and that. My philanthropy, life lessons I've learned, business deals, that sort of thing." I sipped some champagne. "If you don't mind my asking, sir, how did you earn your fortune?" "Well, it's inherited mostly. Tungsten." "Excuse me, sir, did you say tungsten?" "For light bulb filaments." Natasha gazed out at the fields. Watching her, it was easy for me to see where Titania got her statuesque looks. "I read many Danielle Steele. You could get me autograph?" "I don't know her directly, but..." An announcement blared over the loudspeaker. Next up on the cross-country course, Wellington's own Titania Hammersley, riding her stallion Gurov. I smiled at this homage of hers to the Chekhov character. The announcer continued. After her flawless showing in dressage yesterday, Miss Hammersley goes into today's competition well ahead of the field. Titania Hammersley, number 9, starts now. I put down my champagne and trained the binoculars in the starting area. How much do these ghostwriters charge? It varies, sir, but for a good one, which you'd want, I'd say 50,000. What? So what kind of advance could I expect? That's hard to say. Well, we can discuss this later. After some frantic searching with the binoculars, I found Titania and got her in focus. A buzzer sounded over the loudspeaker. She took off. The first half-dozen obstacles, either plain wooden jumps or adorned with flowers, she and Gurov cleared easily, sailing over them and landing cat-like on the turf with distance to spare. Once Titania successfully jumped a hedge-top rock wall, she leaned forward, gripping Gurov's mane, and whipped him into a full-blown gallop. Mud kicked up behind them. There she goes, the proud father said, rapping on the wooden rail. It's a done deal at this point. We crossed to the other side of the tower. I never see her so relaxed, Natasha said. What has relaxed her so? Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Natasha lower her binoculars and look me up and down. I continued to peer out at the course. Of the next 7 obstacles, only 3 were visible from the tower. A dry ditch behind a grassy mound, a water-filled ditch, and 2 rail fences in close succession, and to my untrained eye, she executed them flawlessly. Then she careened down a steep hill and out of sight. An equestrian dead zone, like a spacecraft during re-entry. She'll come out over there. John Hammersley pointed at a wooden wall built into a gap in a hedgerow. 5 feet high, toughest obstacle on the course. After that, she'll be home free. I zoomed in on the wall. 2 small signs, one red, one white, formed guideposts for the wall, so the wall could be distinguished from the greenery of the hedgerow. The white signs had numbers on them. 17. I thought of the writer's comment earlier that he had pulled up at number 17, and in barely the amount of time it took for me to gasp for breath, I was staggered by a sense of literary deja vu. Vronsky's disaster in the steeplechase. I ran down the tower stairs. By the time the announcement came over the loudspeaker, I had climbed over a fence and was sprinting across the field to her. So, the cliffhanger is... You want to know what's going to happen next. That you got to buy the book to find out.